Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting research conducted in southern Brazil in the states of Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul, an area increasingly central to our understanding of early human settlement in South America. This work was part of my master's project under the supervision of Antony Borel and Antoine Lourdeau, with contribution from Amélie da Costa, Cabanès, and the POPARU project team led by Mirian Carbonera and Pereira Santos. In recent decades, numerous early sites dating to the Pleistocene-Holocene transition have been discovered in the Rio de la Plata basin, suggesting that major river systems like the Uruguay River facilitated rapid exploration and occupation. Traditionally associated with the Umbu tradition, characterized by small bifacial point, recent findings now point to a more diverse and regionally variable picture. In the Foz do Chapecó area, for instance, bifacial points are rare, and instead we observe a wide variety of lithic tools and production strategies. Much of this research only began in the 2000s with salvage archaeology during dam construction. The POPARU project recently uncovered two new early sites, Uruguay 1 and Linha Policial 7, that challenged the Umbu model, revealing large bifacial tools, blade production, and minimal projectile points. At Uruguay 1, the focus of this study, 6 archaeological levels were identified. Level 40, dated between 10,500 and 9,500 cal BP, provided a rich assemblage analyzed here for its lithic production and useware. While this presentation focuses on useware analysis, I'll start with a brief overview of the technological findings. A wide variety of raw material was used, including volcano-sedimentary sandstone, flint, basalt, chalcedony, and quartz. Two main flaking strategies were observed for sandstone and flint. Off-site production of large flakes, later transported and used or retouched on-site, and in-situ flake production, which yielded numerous refits. Through the goal of this activity remains unclear. Blade production is a key feature of the assemblages and aligns with broader regional traditions. These blades were used either unmodified or retouched into ogival-shaped tools. A notable find in sandstone was a large bifacial tool shaped using both hard and soft percussion. Chalcedony and quartz reduction included both unipolar and bipolar on anvil percussion, often alternating. In chalcedony, elongated fragments referred to as type agulla were selectively produced. The quartz assemblage includes bladelets and various retouched forms on flakes and bipolar fragments. This assemblage exhibits a remarkable diversity of production strategies, and it is more important to emphasize that it constitutes a single assemblage produced by one population at a specific moment in time. This technological observation raised several functional questions, such as can functional distinction be identified among the different types of retouched tools, such as denticulates and ogival forms? Do blades reveal specific functional patterns or uses? And finally, do the small chalcedony and quartz artifacts, whose function remain unclear, reflect deliberate selection, and were they possibly used in their unmodified state? To better interpret the archaeological useware traces, we conducted experimental study using local raw material from the Foz do Chapecó region, primarily through reference collection developed by Amélie da Costa and additionally carried out in Hungary. Despite slight differences in protocol, both followed the shared methodology, systematic macro and microscopic documentation of flakes before and after use. Each experiment recorded the task performed, duration, number of strokes, and any signs of damage or tool inefficiency. After use, tools were thoroughly cleaned in an ultrasonic bath to prepare them for analysis. Microscope analysis was conducted using various systems depending on the lab availability, including the IROX digital microscope in Paris and the Zeiss axioscope, the SEM, and Lex confocal microscope in Budapest. The latter provided crucial high-resolution 3D surface data for texture analysis. Surface texture analysis, a central focus of our study, offers a quantitative approach to identifying useware and may help reduce inter-observer variability. This method distinguishes between surface components such as form, which is the overall shape, waviness, and roughness, and micro-roughness, which is the fine-scale wear. This can be measured using geometric parameters like SA and SQ, though applying a multi-scale approach is essential as different wear types manifest at different observation levels. To perform this analysis, surface treatment is required. I won't go into detail here, but the overall workflow is summarized in this visual created on the Mountains Map software. With this methodological framework in place, I will now turn to the main result of the functional analysis. For the chalcedony, experiments were conducted exclusively on plant materials. Among these, activities involving capim and wood produced comparable useware traces. Both resulted in a dense, domed polish. The polish formed by capim is smooth and develops only on the highest topographic points of the surface, characterized by very fine striation. In contrast, the polish resulting from wood is more compact, rougher in texture, and restricted to the extreme edge of the active area. Although the use duration for cassava processing was brief, it resulted in a strikingly shiny polish. This polish does not appear to significantly alter or smooth the microtopography of the surface, but rather sits atop it, creating a glossy residue-like appearance, although it is not a residue as it persists even after multiple cleanings. Moving to the sandstone artifacts used on plant material, we observed substantial variability. For example, pieces that worked reed develop a dense, smooth, and domed polish. In contrast, those used on capim, also a non-woody plant, produced similar polishes in terms of texture, but far less developed and more localized, despite identical duration of use. Striations were observed in several locations. These differences likely result from variation in the silica content of the plant, which is known to influence polish formation. Woody plants such as wood and vasurinia produced localized compact polish and important scarring. They were also domed but less pronounced in comparison to those formed on non-woody plants. Particularly distinctive results were observed on tools used to process tubers. This produced a highly reflective, shiny polish that, like on the chalcedony, appears to sit on the surface without modifying its texture. Despite this appearance, it is not a residue, as it remains after repeated cleaning. Notably, differences were observed between cassava and igname polishes, even under identical use duration, again likely due to the compositional differences in the processed material, such as silica content. Finally, on animal materials, fresh bone produced well-developed flat polishes with heterogeneous texture, fine striation, and important scarring. Dry bone generated similar polishes, but significantly less developed. Skin processing resulted in a shiny polish with a greasy appearance. Regarding the quantitative analysis, several preliminary statistical tests were conducted and produced promising results, successfully distinguishing between different worked material. However, when all the surface texture parameters were included in the PCA, a high degree of overlap between material types was observed, limiting the interpretative potential of the results. For this reason, we believe the method is not yet ready to be applied to the archaeological assemblage. Various solutions are currently being considered, such as adjusting the cutoff values or optimizing the parameters by selecting only the most relevant variable. However, this process is time-consuming, and it remains possible that this method may not be suitable for highly heterogeneous materials such as sandstone and chalcedony. Turning now to the archaeological results, you'll notice that most of the observed useware traces on sandstone exhibit a pitted surface texture. Based on our interpretation, this is likely not linked to useware itself, but rather to post-depositional alterations, potentially due to the acidity of the sediment at the site. As mentioned earlier, the first category includes retouch tools. The ogival-shaped blade tools exhibit functional variability. The first example shows use where traces are only one edge with a smooth transition between used and unused areas. Although retouched, significant scarring was also identified on unretouched portions. The polish is well developed and compact, though relatively flat, with a heterogeneous texture that is reminiscent of traces left by working hard materials such as bones. However, due to the absence of striation and the slightly smoother texture, this identification remains uncertain. The second ogival tool shows a similar pattern of use, but with a more domed and smoother polish. No clear scarring was observed, or it may have been obscured by the retouching. A single denticulate tool in the assemblage presented use wear traces. On the two color images, a shiny, greasy polish can be observed, similar to that seen in experimentals used on skin. On the grayscale laser intensity image, a compact and heterogeneous polish is visible. Notably, both the retouched and unretouched edges of the tool show use, with substantial scarring on the unretouched side. The combination of these traces may suggest use in butchery-related activity, potentially involving both skin and bone. However, due to the limited development of the traces, no firm conclusion can be drawn. Blades constitute the most functional homogeneous category within this study. All three blades analyzed show intensive use wear concentrated along a single longitudinal edge. The ventral face displays as well developed smooth domed polish with minimal scarring, while the dorsal face shows significant scarring that overprint the polish. This trace pattern is characteristic of scraping activities where one face remains in prolonged contact with the worked material, while the opposing face experiences damage from the tearing action. The polish is very similar to that produced in reed working experiment. However, since reed is not native to the region, this likely indicates use on another silica-rich, non-woody plant. Moreover, the intensity of the polish suggests long or repeated use, potentially more than what was achieved in experimental settings. Of the 11 Agulla-type fragments analyzed, only 5 yielded interpretable use-wear traces. The two shown here both exhibit traces on a single edge. The first displays a compact, smooth polish limited to the very edge with visible striation. The second, although the traces are less developed, present a smooth polish on the highest topographic surfaces. Both polishes resemble those observed on tools used with capim, supporting the hypothesis of use on non-woody vegetation. Two other fragments shown on the left appear to have been used exclusively at their tip. The first exhibits a flat, rough polish with striation, not covered by our experimental range, but possibly indicative of harder material processing. The third fragment shows wear both at the tip and laterally, it along with the central piece present a shiny polish that seems to sit on the surface, a feature observed on tools used with cassava. However, cassava had not been yet introduced from Amazonia at this period, suggesting these tools may have been used on another type of tuber. Lastly, 2 quartz tools were analyzed based on previously published use-wear reference collection, as no quartz was included in our experiment. The first is a bladelet with heavy scarring along both edges, especially at the distal end. The centripetal direction of the scars may indicate a rotary motion, although no further elements allowed a more precise interpretation. The second tool is a retouched bipolar fragment that exhibits extensive fracturing and abrasive wear characteristic of hard materials such as antler, bone, or wood. In conclusion, our analysis reveals both inter- and intra-category functional variability among the retouched tools. However, the blades stand out as particularly standardized category both in terms of the task performed and the material worked. They exhibit intensive use and consistent structural organization, with one straight edge dedicated to activity and the opposite edge likely used for handling or hafting. Among the small Chalcedony artifacts, a diversity of function is suggested, yet two recurring morphological configurations were observed, hinting at some degree of formalization in their use. On a methodological level, our ongoing objective is to better understand how surface texture parameters are computed on heterogeneous raw materials and to optimize the approach by refining parameters and area selection and exploring multi-scale filtering strategies. Finally, this result open several promising research perspectives. They resonate with recent study highlighting blade production across South and South America, an area where comparative analysis of production technique and use wear could give valuable insight. The findings related to small Chalcedonian quartz artifacts also call for a renewed focus on this long overlooked production, despite their persistence across Brazil over extended chronological periods. An issue that will form the basis of my forthcoming PhD research.